Hello there, welcome back to the channel. It's Richie here from Dowie After Dark. How are all of you today? So I'd love to speak to everyone about what my plans are next with the dwarves. So I have had some really good success with the Grand Army and the Royal Clans. So I've managed to win a few GTs with both now. And I really love playing the mass block infantry of the dwarves. I love using the big infantry blocks walking forward. It's just so synonymous with Warhammer Fantasy when you've got big rank and flank units marching forward and then clashing with the enemy. I know some of you don't like the way that some of the units fan out when they're in combat into Linehammer, but unfortunately that is one of the only ways that infantry is doing well in this edition right now. But most of the time, I do like to keep my big infantry blocks in the big squares and then Death Star them forward. So in the Grand Army, I like to use lots of guns, getting the Gunthane in there, the Iron Drakes, a couple of grudge throwers, and then just pelting the enemy, maybe some handgunners in there as well with Burlock. Then in the Royal Clans, I love to use a more combat-focused army that's based around a king, the BSB Runesmith, and then a massive unit of Longbeards that's going in there and wrecking face with Strength 7 on the charge or on the follow-up, which can scare any type of T6 monster. Being able to win them on threes is a massive deal, and it does make your enemy think twice about where they're going to put those T6 monsters or those ridden dragons. So going forward into next year, I have been playing around with a couple of different armies that I'm thinking about using. So I was thinking Slayers for a bit, but I think I might put Slayers on hold for just a little bit until I can work out how to try and make them really good. I've got some kind of ideas going with the Slayers, kind of focused around a massive brick and then put all the characters in there, put the Doomseekers in there, and then kind of jump the Doomseekers out so they can kill some stuff. But that's kind of concentric around an anvil as well. So I kind of wanted to change the playstyle up slightly going into the new year. So as some of you might have seen, I have posted up pictures of the Gyrocopters I've been working on. So next year, I am going to be trying out Bomber Command. So this is the first one I have painted up so far. I'm going up with them on different heights so that they can kind of look dynamic on the board. And I am going to try an army of either 18 or 17 gyrocopters. Now, the reason that there's going to be different variants is because in different tournaments, they give different comp systems for events. So in the Welsh Open that I'm going to in February, there is a comp involved that armies cannot be more than 10 wide. So this really would change up how I would use my Royal Clans. I really want to get an X-Force army ready for this so I can capitalize on the fact that other armies that really need that going above 10 wide can't do that as well. It's also going to be, I feel, dominated by the skirmishing armies and also T6 monsters, because if infantry can't go above 10 wide and monstrous infantry can't go above 5 wide, suddenly those T6 monsters are really hard to pin down and really hard to kill. So my plan going into this is to create a massive skirmish army with the gyrocopters, give them all clatter guns, and then just kind of zip around, getting out of line of arc, and playing much more hit-and-run guerrilla warfare. The entire focus of the list is around scout gyrocopters and normal gyrocopters with clatter guns, and then a couple of units of rangers to be scout units, just to hide them where I need to hide them, so they're not easy points for the enemy, and then also a couple of artillery pieces which will be in my rare. Definitely something to think about when you're getting armies ready for events is what comp they have in place. And also you need to get your TO's opinion on certain rules that they think. So in the S-Bot, for instance, which is a square-based online tournament, the rule of 6 applies to all corps, which means with scout gyrocopters, they are restricted to 2 per corps, but then you could take up to 3 of them in the specials, which kind of circumvents the corps limitation of 2 on them. But in the Welsh Open, I have asked the TO, and he is only allowing me to take 4 units of scout gyrocopters, which is absolutely fine. You should always ask your TO's permission before you do things, and you should also find out the comp system before that event. There's nothing worse than making a list, trying out new tactics, and then that being taken away from you, and you've got to start all over again in potentially a completely different tactic for your army. I know a lot of you Dowie players out there have been rocking the Royal Clans since we managed to get a good competitive base of the list down, and I know that everybody's enjoying using that. It's been really fun to absolutely smash face with the D6 damage king. But I feel it is time to try a different type of army to see if I can get that to work. I know there's been a lot of clamour online about the gyrocopters feeling really oppressive. I don't think they're that bad at all. I mean, the D6 shots with the clatter gun are only strength 4, and also you're going to be hitting on 5s and 6s a lot of the time as well. It's more the avoidance that people are finding annoying. But then again, we are playing into a meta that's got the 360 Pegasus and also all of those wood elves as well. So to be able to compete with this, the Dowie have to find ingenious methods to be able to fight against them. And one of those definitely is jumping around at your max move distance with the Gyrocopters, getting out of line of arc, and then killing those units where they can't get to you. I feel that there's a slight misinterpretation of how easy this army is to use. It is very, very positional, and it really comes down to how well you can get out of line of arcs, get out of line of sight, and make sure that you're not overrun into. And also, if you play into Bretonnians, you really need a plan of when that horn goes off, which can spell doom for my Dowie brothers and sisters that are in those little Gyrocopters. Like I said previously, the main point of this army is relying on those Gyrocopters with the clatterguns. So the clatterguns are really interesting. They have move and shoot, which means that you can fly, double your movement. So your normal Gyrocopters are flying 18 inches, where your scout Gyrocopters are flying 20. So you can really try and run rings around your opponents. But unfortunately, there is a rule that they have, which is the multi-shot rule, which unfortunately means they get an additional -1 to shoot. So you might be trying to play avoidance, but you also want to try and get within 12 inches, which is half range, to not stack too many minuses onto your shooting. Like I said before, hitting on 5s and 6s to me doesn't feel that oppressive, as there is no access to poison in this list. But with D6 shots, you might be able to spike and do quite a bit of damage. I think it's going to be quite hard to try and win big with this army. I think it's more going to try and sneak through even an 11-9 or a 12-8, then just try and get 4 or 5 wins in. Armies that have access to lots of poison are going to be an absolute struggle. I've been practicing this army into loads of different really strong armies, and there's definitely some that it does a lot better into. There's another unique rule that the Gyrocopters themselves, rather than the scout Gyrocopters, have access to. So this is dive bomb, and it's quite a nice way to get around any of those units that stack minuses to hit. So if you're playing against a sneaky knife here and they put -2 or they've got -3 on their units to be able to hit, then you can just dive bomb over the top of them and you get D6 strength 3 AP1 hits going into them with those normal gyros. So if you were thinking, oh no, I want to run loads more scout gyros and normal gyros because they've got a better ballistic skill, then this is definitely a rule that you need to think about. Because if they're stacking minuses to hit, the normal Gyrocopters dive bomb is very good at dealing with those units. Having access to a pre-game Vanguard move is also very strong, because if you get first turn, you can be horrendously aggressive as you're already 9 or 10 inches forward. Or if you know that you're going to have to play a defensive game, you could potentially create a stacked deployment. You can also potentially do a fake deployment and then move them 9 or 10 inches away, so it makes your opponent a lot more difficult to try and get to you. Now, this is a really fun tactic. I always love doing feign deployments if I can. Normally with my Royal Clans army, I will do a full flank denial type deployment, potentially putting one unit on one side so they start deploying there and then put the rest of the army on the other. And that is something that you can really do with the Gyrocopters. So a fun little tactic you have with the scout Gyrocopters is hit and run. So if you manage to get a flank charge or a rear charge, then this rule really comes in handy. If your opponent does a give ground or a fall back in good order move, but I would suggest that this is only really good on a give ground move, because you hit them, you win, and then you yourself can fall back in good order away from them to be able to shoot them again, and you're not locked in combat. Also, if they gave ground, it means that they would have to then pivot round to face you, and then you've got another turn of shooting at them. So I think that's really good. Unfortunately, if they have fell back in good order from you, they can just turn to face and redress and look at you, which nobody wants. But the fire and flee is quite good if you do manage to get charged. The only problems with fire and flee is you only flee 1d6. So it's quite easy to get caught if you're relatively close to the opponent. So you can only do that if you know that you're going to be able to get away. Do not risk it on a 6. It's not going to work. You need to be prepared for if you roll a 1. So a nice little tactic you could do with that is make sure you're 1 inch into their charge radius. Then you know that you can get out if they're charging at you. I'm not fully set on the list yet, so I'm not going to post a list in the comments. But as soon as I am set on it and I've done all of my testing and I'm ready for the events, then I'll do a video and post a list in there as well. I'm currently trialing 3 organ guns in the list as well. It's just separated on the back line so that overruns can't get to them, but they're just a bit of a nuisance with their 30-inch range. So the opponent's going to have to send units at those, and then I'm going to use my Gyrocopters to just kind of fly around and be a nuisance in the meantime. I've had a lot of fun using this and quite a bit of success with it as well. It's a very fun army to use. I don't think they're anywhere near as oppressive as people think they are. I mean, they're toughness 5 or toughness 4 if they're scout Gyrocopters, and then they either have a 4-up or a 5-up save, which, to be perfectly honest, is quite easy to get through. So if you do misplace any of your units, then they are unfortunately going to die. But having Swift Stride does make them a little bit speedier than a normal dwarf. So this is the first iteration of my X-Force army, and I've been having great fun with it so far. So I've upgraded my organ guns as well, so they get the move and shoot, which is pretty cool. I mean, they do lose a point of toughness, but they're out by themselves, so if they die, they die. They are giving up the 125 points, but I think they're quite fun, kind of little distractions really. Also being able to move and shoot, you can kind of just poke them out from beside buildings and just pepper the enemy. Obviously, this does give you another -1 to hit, so on long range, you're going to be hitting on 6s, but it's more of just a ranged threat at the back of the board and the kind of psychological impact that that can have on your opponent. Plus, if you do manage to roll well, then they can be quite good. Remember as well, in the X-Force, you need to take an engineer. So I am playing around with only taking one hero in the entire list, which is to keep the points down a minimum, which would be the compulsory engineer. So he's going to be stood potentially by one of the organ guns or potentially in between two of them so that he can offer his buff out to either one. It is definitely hilarious to play with this many gyrocopters and have hardly any dwarves on the field. It is definitely a very different way to play the game than how the Royal Clans or the Grand Army perform, but I think the Gyrocopters avoidance game is quite strong. There's a few different armies that do kind of struggle to go into it, but you do have to make sure that all of your movements are very, very precise. All those flying monsters are going to get you. Also, if you're playing against other 360 charge arc flyers, then you really, really need to make sure that they can't get you, or the game is going to be over really, really quick. Also, something that I found very interesting is if you're playing against an opponent that has lots of shooting and artillery, this list can crumble very fast. So you need to make sure if you're going to play with this that you need to use the terrain correctly. So you're hiding behind bits of terrain, popping out, and they can't get too many things in line of sight to you. I will definitely still be using the Royal Clans as my proper competitive list, as I do think that that is very strong and it also suits my playstyle. But I'm getting the Gyrocopters ready for next year, and I'm really excited to get them on the board. I've had several games on Warhol so far with them, as I do have them all on bases, but I am painting them all up and then I'm going to magnetize them to movement trays before I actually use them in real life, just because I have put them so high on their bases that they are at risk of falling over at all times. So they need to be magnetized down, or I'm going to have loads of broken gyrocopters absolutely everywhere. Have any of you been playing with the X-Force and running a load of gyrocopters? Please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to know how you've been getting on with them and what armies that you found that they're good into and what armies you found absolutely destroy them. I think if you try and play too cagey against wood elves, I think they're just going to end up poisoning you to death. I think if you play too cagey with lots of gyrocopters, I think shooting armies are going to just kind of dismantle you. But I think if you play hyper aggressive into those, then you can do quite well into them. So I think it's going to be down to what armies are strong against us and also your play tactics going into them as well. Once I've got my play style fully down for these, I'm going to post loads of videos where I run through deployments and also the best places the Vanguard move them to after that deployment setup as well, depending on what army you're going into. And yes, I have played into the horn-wielding Bretonnians. If you get turn 1, you can reliably get some charges off. And if you can charge into those, you're disabling their lances and you could potentially win those combats. But if you don't get second, you are going to have to create static gun pillboxes that can't be overrun into. So you've just got to make sure that all of your units are a certain distance apart and all kind of separated into zigzag formation so they can't just overrun for your entire army. But this is definitely something that I'm working on at the moment. That is definitely the worst game for this army. So I'm trying to come up with some methods to make it a little bit easier for our Dowie brothers and sisters. So I'm trying to come up with some ways to make it easier for us to play against them. I've been really enjoying messing around with this army so far, and it's just very interesting to have so much mobility in your entire army. I'm just used to being able to throw one unit quite far. This entire army fanning out like bees and just enveloping the enemy is a very interesting way to play. Just don't rely on the fact that you're actually going to do that much damage, because like I said, D6 shots per gyrocopter hitting on 5s and 6s isn't going to do that much damage. So you are going to be looking for those small victories. I don't think a gyrospan army can table anything, and you're going to have a real hard time in trying to kill those T6 monsters. So my advice going to you would be to leave those T6 monsters alone and try and kill some targets that you can actually kill while conserving as many points in your army as you possibly can. If you do want to create a gyrocopter themed list and you don't have that many gyrocopters, then please head to UK Resin Prints, which is the channel sponsor. He has just got the trade rights for Highland miniatures, so you can go and use the same gyrocopters that I'm using. There is also a 15% discount code down below, so please go and have a look on there. If you prefer Games Workshop, there is also a link down below, which is an affiliate link to Firestorm Games, which would really help the channel out. Now, while I'm talking about the channel, I would just like to say a massive thank you to the channel members. It really means a great deal to me that you want to support the channel. So I would just like to say a massive thank you to Magic Machek, Close Order, Tim Pitcher, Tom Boller, Roll the Initiative Gaming, Wasted 13, Anthony Cruz, Voltan Ignacio, Mako 1981, Omega Minus, Moyax, and the Iron Bear clan of Karak Azul. And I am a massive fan of that name. I cannot wait to fight alongside Karak Azul on the battlefield. I feel that them and Karak Drak could definitely take on most things that come at us. Thank you so much for watching. This is just me having a little ramble about what I'm going to be doing next year coming up with the Dwarf Army. And then I think after that, I definitely will sit down and get the Slayers on the table. Please let me know down below what armies you've been enjoying using with the Dwarves and what your preferred playstyles are. If you prefer just big gun lines, or if you prefer throwing around those big blocks of infantry, or if you're enjoying the gyro spam, please let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye.
In the night of stone, we march so bold, with our sharp and hearts so cold. Through halls of old, our vengeance sparks in shadows dark. It's dawn, we after dark. For years untold, and ledgers kept where blood runs cold. In caverns deep, the drums they roar will settle scores in Dawi lore. The grudge is held for years untold, in ledgers kept where blood runs cold. In caverns deep, the drums they roar will settle scores in Dawi lore. Under mountains, watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient days. With iron will and spirit stark, will bring the light in Dawi after dark. Golden gems shall guide our fight through endless tunnels lost tonight. The hammer falls, the anvil sings, in Dawi's name our battle rings. The molten forges fuming red, our enemies shall quake with dread. In caverns grim our legends start, we strike as one in Dawi after dark. Under mountains watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient days. With iron will and spirit stark, will bring the light in Dawi after dark. Watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient days.